their certification, but they definitely have been doing the job, moving right along, making sure that they are on top of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you just joining us, I'm Gavin Verhey, joined here in the booth by Star City Games event manager Jared Silva, and we're going to round 6 of the Star City Games Open Series here in Dallas-Fort Worth. On the left of your screen, a player who needs no introduction, Gerry Thompson. He's playing his take on the blue-white-black Cobblade archetype, but he's changed a couple things up. He has no Day of Judgments, he's got Temple Magnets instead. This has been good for him all day, but it's going to hurt him a little in this matchup. His opponent, Kilhefner, is playing mono-red Goblins, a deck we haven't seen a lot of. Usually Goblins are reserved for the second day of open competition, but here we have them on day 1. We've got basically all the Goblins you could ever want to play in Standard, a bunch of burn spells. He's going to wish he had those Day of Judgments, but Gerry's a good player. We'll see if he can pull this out.
Yeah, the thing that sets the Goblin deck apart from a Kildatha red build is that instead of focusing on just absolutely coming out of the gates, putting out as much as possible, it has a lot more staying power, and it can really put down some threats with Goblin Chieftain, can have some really explosive turns.
Yeah, and you don't have to play all the artifacts for things like Kildatha Rebirth either. You know, you can just focus on being consistent and playing in burn spells, which is exactly what a deck like this wants to do.
Yep, absolutely. It has some reach over the top and can really get in those last points in many different ways.
So it looks like Gerry won the dice roll. Kyle led off with a Spike Shot Elder and then Teetering Peaks. Gerry has opted to play a turn 3 Tumble Magnet, and his opponent doesn't quite have the army yet, so Tumble Magnet's just going to hang back. He'll take 1 from that Spike Shot Elder.
It's interesting to see Gerry with the blue-white-black build since he championed the Spark Blade for a while.
Daniel Powell.
Yeah.
Standard
exactly. I mean,
number 3. This is the last call.
Gerry.
Participate in your event. Please go to the side of the stage again. Daniel Powell.
Gerry scries 1 to up his Jace. Yeah, it's really interesting. Gerry was a big advocate of the red deck and of the red version of Cobblade, and still other players are playing it. AJ Soccer is still playing it in this tournament, but Gerry's decided, well, I want to play the black version. I think it's better against the blue-white version. Or the blue-white-red version, excuse me. And oh no, go ahead.
And here we see exactly why he used Jace's Fate Seal ability rather than just using the Brainstorm. That's a more traditional first Jace play. He forced him to use 2 cards to get rid of it rather than just being able to come straight into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Jace was great. Like, even though it just died, it sucked up a bunch of burn damage there. I mean, it took a Stagger Shock, took a Spike Shot Elder, and now he's able to lay his Gideon, and ideally he's going to be able to put Gideon out of range of anything else. And there's Kyle for you, considering his options. Looks like his hand is pretty stocked with burn spells. Is that 2 Goblin Bushwhackers, 2 Lightning Bolts, and a Burst Lightning?
That's a War Driver on
War
top.
Driver.
And then it did look like 2 Lightning Bolts, but he just decided he was going to take that back out of our range. Burst Lightning, double Lightning Bolt, and War Driver looks like what we've got going.
Oh, is that a Goblin Chieftain? I don't see these cards played often enough. I can't recognize a lot of them.
Chieftain, yeah, that's definitely a Chieftain.
Okay, he does have Bushwhacker also.
So Bushwhacker. With the kick, that makes Spike Shot Elder able to get in some damage if that's the way he wants to go.
Yeah. Of course, now, Kyle doesn't know this, but Gerry has no Day of Judgments, and right now I'm sure he's concerned, well, I don't want to overextend into a day, but secretly Gerry just doesn't have any in his deck, which is a nice little advantage. Your opponents just don't know.
You have to play around it unless you know. That advantage is going to go away if he makes it to the top 8 and his opponent gets to see the list.
Right.
But for the rest of the day, unless he runs into someone who knows what he's playing, then he's going to still have to see them playing around it. So after the attack, we see the War Driver come out. That battle cry can be really very, very effective in this deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it pumps the Spike Shot Elder, which is going to make it deal some extra damage. And right now, he's just trying to get rid of that Gideon. It's going to deal a lot of problems for Kyle. So, you know, he's going to pump up his power. He's going to find some extra ways to deal with Gideon. He's going to be able to pump up his entire army. And I think he's got some burn spells, too, to potentially throw Gerry off by getting rid of that Gideon.
He's got the 2 lightning bolts. Definitely was just flashing both of those.
Awesome.
And so that means he's got a lot of direct damage to knock out Gideon directly if he wants to, which could really throw Gerry off his plan, because usually you expect everybody's going to go fight Gideon, and if you can knock him out before attacks, you can just start coming in straight to the head.
Yeah, time and time again we've seen Gideon really, like, the Caw-Blade player plays him and they just really lean on him. They're like, okay, well, I have a turn, and when you don't have that turn, everything goes out of whack.
Yeah.
So it looks like Gerry's preordaining again. In his hand right now, I think I see an Inquisition of Kozilek, and on the top of his library it was a Doomblade and something else. He doesn't want either. And he finds another Gideon, which will help him out. And he Inquisitions Kyle. He's going to take one of those 2 lightning bolts.
And that gives us the Chieftain as well.
Yeah. So his hand is Lightning Bolt, Goblin, Chieftain. The Chieftain is going to pose quite a threat. I think Gerry might feel like he has to take that Chieftain here. It's actually a pretty tough call, because those bolts are going to fight that Gideon, but if he doesn't take that Chieftain, he's going to be in for a ton of extra damage.
It's even possible if he leaves the Chieftain there, you just take a turn and he takes the Chieftain. But if the Chieftain had stayed in the hand, all he's got to do is lay that out, and then he definitely has enough power to wipe down Gideon.
Yeah, the second Gideon in Gerry's hand, I think, probably was what prompted to play him this way. He decided to go -2 to kill Spike Shot Elder. And now he's going to prompt Kyle to attack and kill Gideon, or use a bolt and kill Gideon. And then Gerry can unload a second Gideon on his next turn and reload all the way up to 8 loyalty. And Tumble Magnet.
Tap down the driver, that keeps this in very... He's going to have to use more than 1 card to get through the Gideon. Yep. And uses the bolt.
Yep, there's the bolt, but now Kyle just has burn spells in his hand. Gerry is sitting at a pretty plush 13 life, and with another Gideon coming down this turn, yeah. So, I mean, there is the War Driver and Bushwhacker on Kyle's side, but the Gideon is going to soak up a ton of that damage.
Figuring out what to do here, he's got to decide whether he wants to take out the War Driver or whether he wants to force those guys into leaving his life total alone.
I feel like if you kill the War Driver here, you just prevent so much damage to Gideon that it's probably worthwhile just to kill the War Driver. But nope, Gerry decides to +2. And Kyle draws another land, not what he was looking for. Okay, so Gerry condemns that War Driver.
Yep. Bushwhacker gets in for 2 because of the War Driver's battle cry.
Right. Even though the War Driver has left the battlefield, the ability is still triggered, and Bushwhacker gets pumped up. And now things are looking pretty grim for Kyle. Gerry's going to swing in with a sorted up Gideon. And deal 8, force Kyle to discard a card. And Gerry gets to untap all of his lands.
Now Kyle held on to that land because no reason to play it. Not a whole lot that you're going to be doing with 6 mana in that deck.
Right, exactly. And he knew Gerry had the sword, so he expected, well, he's going to attack me and make me discard. I just have to get rid of this mountain, which was a good play by Kyle.
Now I believe that lightning bolt just went to the head.
Yep, that is right. He did not attack Gideon's loyalty, so...
Well, after Gideon's activated, I've seen many players actually try and throw burn at him, only to remember that the ability also prevents all damage that would be dealt to him.
Correct. Targeting the Gideon when he has a creature with lightning bolts is not such a great idea.
The Stagger Shock he just drew is worth 4. That Arc Trail's worth 1, and I'm unclear as to why he didn't get in with the... he's holding it back so that he still has the Arc Trail, but he had to get rid of that to the Inquisition anyways. Yeah. He was holding back the Bushwhacker to... and it looks like Gerry just has some answers for all of this.
Yep, Gerry got rid of all of Kyle's cards and duplicted his Bushwhacker.
And untapped his whole board.
Yeah, and I can't quite see if Gerry has a Colonnade down or not, but that creates a nice blocker for him just in case. he equips up Gideon, and now Kyle's forced to block. He's got a Abyss on Gerry's side, more or less.
Kyle's trying to figure out what gets me out of this. I don't think that's it.
Yep. Too many lands for Kyle, not a quick enough start, and Gerry takes the first game. So having those, not having those Day of Judgments didn't end up costing Gerry there. We'll see.
It may actually have helped him out because early on in the game, it definitely looked like Kyle was aware of overextending and didn't want to get deep out there and get all of his cards on the board. When actually knowing that Gerry doesn't have the days, that may have been the play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if he knew Gerry didn't have day, everything changes. But Gerry made the switch. He played Tumble Magnet instead, and that made all the difference because his opponent couldn't extend it into a Day of Judgment, and yet he still got the advantage for playing out his Tumble Magnet. So that's huge. Interesting to note, Gerry's playing 61 cards in his main deck. And so we go to his sideboard, and what do you think we're going to see here, Gerry?
Well, against a red deck, it looks like the flash freezes have got to come in. It counters everything in the deck. It's just one in a blue to counter whatever you're seeing from the other side is way too good to pass up. I think that you probably see the condemns because I don't think Kyle's life total is very important to Gerry. Gerry is going to win games that he takes control of. He's not going to be in a race and having to deal a couple extra points of damage in order to get rid of a creature shouldn't be any sort of problem at all for him. You may see the Doomblade come in, but I'm trying to think what else you're probably going to see come out.
Right, that's the big question for me is, I mean, Gerry has a lot of cards he can bring in. He's got Into the Royal that could potentially come in too, but how many cards can he actually afford to take out? Maybe Inquisition Kozilla comes out, maybe he doesn't want it. At the same time, you bring opponents like Goblin Chieftain seemed really good that game. Mana Leaks probably come out. You don't want a really reactive card against a red deck.
Well, it also trades out straight for Flash Freeze, which is just a straight hard counter in this matchup.
Right. Maybe Tumble Magnet, I don't know if that's a card that you might not feel is strong enough. Because if all you're doing is tapping down one creature, in a Goblin deck, that might not be exactly what you're going for, because they're going to overload you on creatures.
I think that's definitely more against the Caw Blade builds, because once that blade is equipped, then tapping that down becomes huge.
Right.
You do that inside of combat, and you've just negated one of their big plays. Against the Goblin deck, all you're doing is tapping down a guy, and the rest of the guys are just going to still come in.
Looking over at Kyle's sideboard, he has 4 Ratchet Bombs, 4 Manic Vandals, 4 Mark of Mutinies, and 3 Arc Trails. Which cards here do you think we'll expect to see?
I think the big question is whether he wants to pull things out, because the Mark of Mutinies are not going to be all that relevant. Like stealing a Squadron Hawk, even if it's equipped with one of the swords, isn't going to be a backbreaker usually. The Manic Vandals take out the swords, but the cards that he's going to lose to are probably going to be Gideon or Jace. The Arc Trails could come in for just a little bit of extra reach, but I think he may actually be built to fight against Clawbone.
Yeah, I imagine that's probably why he's doing so well today, is because his main deck is just so well poised for this matchup. And looking over his deck list, I don't think he would really want to cut that much at all. Maybe you can move a couple of the burn spells if you want to, but I think he wants all of them. You can maybe bring in a couple Manic Vandals, but Manic Vandal isn't a Goblin, which certainly makes
it's not that strong. The question is whether or not he's afraid enough of the swords that he's willing to pull something out that is more synergistic with his deck in order to just have the raw power of being able to knock out the swords.
Right. I mean, I feel like especially on the play with the red deck, you probably just try and avoid the swords altogether. Maybe on the draw, it gets a little more tricky. Another question I feel is with Mark of Mutiny, it's on one hand you don't want it in your deck because it slows you down, but on the other hand, what if Gerry's bringing in Baneslayer Angels? That's definitely a legitimate concern.
Well, the other thing that it can do is it can also serve as getting rid of a blocker. while turning something around and getting a couple of extra points in. It can be very strong, but the problem is in a game like the last one where he's winning on the back of Gideon, there's literally no targets.
Right.
All he's doing is activating Gideon, and then on Kyle's turn, nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with the blue-black-white builds, he's probably not expecting Baneslayer Angel, and he's correct to do so. Gerry doesn't have it, so we'll see if he boarded those in, but I don't expect him to. I mean, the other card to be worried about potentially is Basilisk's Caller, but I don't think you'd board in Vandals just for that. And I think on the play, you just want to be as fast as possible, and then maybe on the draw, a couple of Vandals come in to deal with some of the swords.
I think Basilisk Caller is significantly less scary in the blue-white-black version.
Right.
As opposed to the red version.
Yeah, no Cunning Spark Mages.
A Goblin Guide from Kyle starts us off, and it looks like he's going to have a little bit faster run this time.
Oh, much faster. Guide, Teetering Peaks. Wow, that's 6 points on turn 2.
Whoa. And there's one of the Condemns that we think came in.
Yeah, Condemn is just what Gerry's looking for here. For 1 mana, it deals with a Goblin Guide or any other fast threat.
Which one did you think?
And it does just that. Where Gerry was going to be taking 6 on turn 2, he only takes 2 instead.
Yep, and Kyle going up to 24 is not all that relevant in this matchup. He pulls the Inquisition of Kozilek off the top, and the question is he going to have the black mana? Nope.
So he did at least 1 Inquisition in.
Yeah.
I'd imagine he probably cut some of them, but I don't think he. I guess he did not cut all of them.
Well,
so Kyle did bring in Mark Immunity to his hand.
That's, I think, 3 lands that he's picked up off the guides. That's pretty good. That's the danger when you play that. But
yeah. Goblin Chieftain is still pretty good there from Kyle. Pumps up that guide and has haste itself. Plus, it gives all of Kyle's other goblins haste, which is the big danger here.
Players, your pairings from round number
getting
1
in for 5 takes him down to, I believe, 11 at this point. The Tumble Magnet.
So Gerry also left the magnets in, and Kyle is sitting on Mark Mutiny right now, and I'm sure he wishes it was just something else.
Well, it may create a turn where Gerry thinks that he's stabilized and just hasn't.
Right. There's Spike Shot Elder, which is a nice little combination with the Goblin Chieftain, because the Spike Shot Elder is now a 2/2, which means it's for 3 mana you deal 2 damage, which is pretty awesome for not having to spend a card.
And Gerry's got to, just absolutely got to tap down the Goblin Guide, because that's another 4 damage to him, taking him down to 7. He's going to be able to activate the Spike Shot Elder, not even use a card, drop him down to 5.
Yeah, Gerry, this is the point where you're like, I wish I had Day of Judgment, and Gerry just doesn't have access to any. I was surprised he wasn't sideboarding any at all, but no, he decided to run it dayless. All right, so Gerry opts for Inquisition.
And the Stagger Shock's going to drop him to 5, and it's going to come back, drop him down to 3, and that's pretty much it.
Yep. And yeah, Gerry pretty much did that Inquisition solely for information. I think he knew that that was going to be game, so he was like, well, I might as well pick up the information, see what's in my opponent's hand. And actually seeing that Mark Immunity did tell him something, like his opponent brought in Mark Immunity when he didn't have anything to target. So he might know to play around it from the next game, which is important. But yeah, that was a really fast game. I don't even know if Gerry was on the play, how much would have changed.
No, that's what the Goblins deck can do. Sometimes it just comes out of the gate. And remember, there was also a Condemn in there from Gerry, so it wasn't without any resistance. Gerry definitely had some cards, and some of the cards that he brought in specifically to try and combat this deck, and still did not have the gas to get out of that situation.
Yeah, it was just blisteringly fast. I mean, Gerry condemned the Goblin guy that normally would allow you to stabilize. You know, he prevented 4 damage, cut Kyle off from doing anything that turn, and it just didn't matter. He just led right back with the Goblin Chieftain the next turn. It's kind of cool to see a deck like this duel, because it's been talked about a lot. People have always played like Kuldotha Red or the Mono Red deck that Patrick Sullivan piloted in Edison. But seeing something like this, just a pure Goblins deck, is really cool.
And this deck has definitely been around. If you look through the Too Much Information spreadsheets, if you read the articles, you'll see it. It's kind of hanging right down by the bottom. There's always there's always 3 or 4 of them, and it's one of those decks that people have wanted to build for a long time, wanted to see if it can work, and it's one of those decks that I think is going to find it's weekend, and if you try to beat this deck, you can beat this deck.
Absolutely.
But for, this may be the weekend where this deck is just in the right place. It's in the right meta game, and it has a lot of prey in this format right now.
And it's also just like having the right build is really important too. I mean, like you said, we've seen a lot of the Goblins decks, and that's true, but a lot of them, might have not been built the same way. For example, I think a lot of people like Warren Instigator a lot, and in this case, Kyle's like, I just want to play more burn spells. I'm perfectly happy just being like, all right, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Stagger Shock, 4 Burst Lightning, 1 Arc Trail. So I essentially function as a mono red deck, but I just have all the synergy in my creatures. I mean, I'm still playing the cards I would play anyway, right? When Patrick Sullivan won, he had Spike Shot Goblin, Goblin Guide, and Ember Hauler. So it's not that much further of a stretch to be like, okay, well, I'll just play Goblin War Driver and Goblin Chieftain and Goblin Bushwhacker.
And Chieftain just makes them all so much better.
Exactly.
Haste, as we learned from Legacy, that's the key right there. Being able to just come out of nowhere and force your opponent to always be thinking about what could happen on the next turn, and not just be playing to what you have on the board. It's such an advantage.
Right, yeah, I mean, it totally changes the math. I mean, especially with a card like Gideon, because you can play Gideon safely if there's not a Goblin Chieftain on the board, but Goblin Bushwhacker and Chieftain really mess up the math on doing something like that. We'll see what happens this game. So Gerry looks like he's got a Condemn in his opener, along with a land or 2. Looks like Marsh Flat, Seachrome Coast.
Seachrome Coast.
Preordain. A pair of Preordains, maybe. Little land late. Gerry's thinking about this one.
He's got an Inquisition in there too. Marsh Flats.
Okay.
Kyle's looking at his, and we're starting off.
Yep.
Preordain.
Yep.
We'll see whether or not that can make it a little bit better. There's the Swamp that's going to let him Inquisition and basically have his pick from his hand.
All right, Goblin Guide revealing an Inquisition.
Ooh.
So Gerry even gets to cast the card that he wanted to cast anyway. And not give his opponent any
play that Swamp tapped.
Yep. So, okay, there's the Manic Vandal, so it looks like he did bring those in.
There's a Stagger Shock. Is that the...
I think it's Ember Hauler?
I'm trying to figure if that's Ember Hauler or Arc Trail. I think that's Ember Hauler.
I think it's Ember Hauler. It's funny, a lot of the cards look alike. I think you could also make a case for Goblin Chieftain, so it's interesting. I can't see what the other 2 cards are quite. I know it's a creature, because it has a power toughness box, but I can't quite make them out. And Gerry knows this decision is important.
Yeah, that's an Ember Hauler, Stagger Shock, Manic Vandal. Mountain, and he takes the Spike Shot Elder. That was the card that we were missing. So that looks like he's going to be able to get the Ember Hauler in.
All right.
But the Condemn sends his Goblin Guide away.
Yep. So Condemn did exactly what Gerry wanted it to do there. And
the goal here is just to stay high enough, deep enough into this game that you make all of Kyle's cards just worse than yours.
So Kyle opted to not cast his Ember Hauler there. Instead of sitting back.
Or is that...
It has a creature power toughness box.
Did we get a confirm on what that card was? The card just taken with Inquisition?
Maybe he was concerned about not having a mana to sacrifice it. I don't know.
Squadron Hawk is just
and things are
going and getting friends.
Yeah, and Gerry is taking the lead here. Without a board presence, the Squadron Hawks are really going to clog up Kyle's ability to get
Is that a cold Manic Vandal?
It looks like it. Yep.
It was.
So it was an Ember Hauler that Kyle discarded. He must have opted not to cast it, afraid he couldn't pay 1 to use its ability.
Unclear as to what he was afraid of there.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure either. All I can think of is that he didn't want to get Doombladed or something like that.
Might as well just throw some of those guys out. No one more else to search for.
Yep. Kyle drew another Ember Hauler to make up for the one in the graveyard. Yeah, I think I would have definitely cast the Ember Hauler there, but guess that's neither here nor there now. So Manic Vandal comes in. It'll trade with some Hawks. Down comes Ember Hauler.
Yep. Interesting that Gerry was willing to throw 2 of his Hawks into it.
Yeah, I feel like Gerry is in the mode like all I have to do is take control of this game and I'll be able to win.
Yeah, just stay alive and cast Gideon, I think, is the plan.
Exactly, but his hand looks kind of clogged. There are at least 3 lands in there. I'm not sure if the 4th card is also a land. So, although in a good position right now, Gerry needs to find some action.
The 4th one's the...
Oh, that's the last Hawk.
The last Hawk.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, his other 2 cards are definitely lands.
He's got the Marsh Flat and I think the Seachrome, another Seachrome Coast.
That sounds right to me. Right,
it's interesting that the Marsh Flat hasn't come down. Losing that life point is and there's another Ember Hauler. Losing that life point's not great against goblins, but on the other hand, you want to get those lands out of your deck, especially when your hand starts clogging up with them.
I actually feel like it's interesting. This comes up a lot. Theoretically, it thins your deck out, but he's cast Preordained twice, and he knows what the bottom 4 cards of his deck are. So if there are more lands there, it's actually just putting more lands into his deck, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I would guess that's probably why he hasn't Marsh Flats yet, just so that extra lands that he Preordained away aren't getting back into his deck. He just wants to find action. But he's not doing a good job of it so far. I mean, there's a Condemn for the Ember Hauler, but it's still going to hit him for 2.
Not going to do a whole lot.
Yeah.
Turns into a straight-up kill spell there.
Yep, Spike Shot Elder. So, Elder not that threatening, but its ability will still do some work on Gerry's life total.
Now, this is one of those situations where you don't really want to be mana flooded if you're Gerry. But the other side of that is, and that's a stone cold bluff right there, holding 2 lands, tapping out his mana, just trying to make Kyle think about what he has. And you may note he tapped 4 mana with 2 white in it.
Huh. Interesting. Nice little bluff for Day of Judgment, not to overextend. Yeah, at first I thought, okay, he's thinking about that creeping tar pit, but...
I think that's what he's going to wind up doing here, but he's just using a little bit of mind games here, making Kyle think about what he's got.
Yeah, and I would absolutely do that if I was Gerry, especially if you're activating the creeping tar pit anyway. It kind of creates the illusion you were making a choice, and that's exactly what he wanted to do. What a great play by Gerry. A lot of players I don't think would make those kind of bluffs. So Elder serves in for 1. And he passes back. Oh, Stoneforge Mystic.
That's going to change this game a lot.
Yes. I assume Gerry will go get his sword. Yeah, his only targets are Sword of Feast and Famine, so he'll go get a sword. And not only will that force Kyle to extend some cards, but it'll deal some damage. Of course, Kyle does have that Manic Vandal.
He also, he's got Lightning Bolt, Stagger Shock, and is it a Manic Vandal?
I'm pretty sure it's a Manic Vandal. Yeah, he had 2 in his hand at one point, and he's only cast 1 of them. So that sounds about right to me.
So at this point, if Gerry casts the sword, do you see the Mystic going down in response to equipping, or do you think the Manic Vandal is just going to come down and...
I think if Gerry were to equip the sword right here, Kyle would just be like, okay, that's fine. I'll Manic Vandal on my turn. Yep, and so now he's just content Stagger Shock and go straight to Gerry's face. But now the question is, will he target the Mystic or not? Yep, now he goes for the Mystic.
And with nothing to equip, Gerry actually leaves the sword in his hand.
Yep, and does not run it into that Manic Vandal. So Kyle attacks with the Elder, Gerry blocks with the Tar Pit, and he's going to use the Elder's ability to deal 1 damage and trade them up. And he just passes back. Gerry was mana flooded. Oh, and there's a Jace. That's another awesome card for Gerry.
Well, that's the trick. It doesn't feel good to be mana flooded, but that's definitely where you want to be rather than short on mana. If you've got all sorts of gas in your hand and you're just not able to get it out there because you don't have the lands, that's going to get you killed a lot more than just having enough cards to stay alive, you're going to draw something. And if you've got 7 lands on the board, at the end of the day, you're going to do just fine when you draw that big spell that's allows you to take control.
Right, especially with something like Jace that gives you extra cards. Yeah, you might be mana flooded, but when you play Jace and draw into 3 more spells, you can play all of your spells now, which is...
Jace making the decision again to scry for 1 rather than brainstorm, put it out of lightning bolt range.
Alright, so looks like that's an Ember Hauler, a Burst Lightning, a Lightning Bolt. Quite the slew of burn in Kyle Kilhefner's hand here. Okay, Ember Hauler comes down.
And pass back over.
Alright, so he's opting to not burn that Jace.
Well, with 5 points of burn, he can take Gerry down to... Jerry's functionally at 6 right now. Because the Ember Hauler's worth 2, that Burst Lightning is worth 2, that Lightning Bolt's worth 3. So that's 7 points of damage that he's got just cold on him. If he can draw another land, turn that Burst Lightning into a kicked Burst Lightning, he can take him all the way down to effectively at 4. Now, the Stoneforge Mystic is definitely going to be a little bit of an issue because it means that the Ember Hauler isn't going to just get through.
Right, and on top of all that, it also gave Gerry a second sword. So Kyle has the Manic Vandal for first sword, but if Gerry can play 2 swords now, and one of them will still stick around, or he'll play his first one and equip it, and then Kyle will have the opportunity to Manic Vandal on his turn. So
Gerry decides to take, not realizing how close to functional 0 he is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe he doesn't imagine Kyle's hand is all burned.
Starting to brainstorm. Oh, and there they are. Those are some pretty strong cards these days.
Yep. And that Flash Freeze is just what Gerry was looking for, because now it tempers Kyle's ability to burn him out.
And by putting that sword back, he still gets full use out of his 3rd Stoneforge Mystic, even though he's only got 2 swords.
Yeah, just the amount of utility the Caw-Blade deck has is excellent. Between shuffling, your cards away from Jace, putting cards back, and then Squadron hawking them away, you just can do so many different things. So, yep, and Gerry Flash Freezes.
And that was the Stagger Shock thing? No, that was Lightning Bolt, right? It was Glare Bolt.
I thought it was Stagger Shock for a second, but
no, it only cost 1.
Yeah, it only cost 1. So
ooh, there's a Chieftain, and that may actually have been the one that he needed to save that Flash Freeze for.
Yeah, that Chieftain.
Oh,
Flash Freeze.
Flash Freeze number 2.
Well,
brainstorming with Jace is good.
Yes. I mean, I think Kyle might be regretting not getting that Jace off of the table immediately, because it put Gerry right back in the game. Obviously, he didn't want to spend his burn doing so, but it's rough for him now.
Flash Freeze puts him in pretty bad shape right now. He's got to pass over because swinging in, not willing to trade that Ember Hauler for Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if he brought in those Flash Freezes because we hadn't seen any yet, and the game had gone rather long. But no, he had them, and he found them just when it counted too.
Yep. Well, that had to be the clearest board out of this whole match. The Manic Vandals coming in, we had to question that a little bit, but I think both of us agreed Flash Freezes are auto. They're the first 4 that you snap in.
Yeah, Flash Freeze seems important, especially just getting rid of Goblin Chieftain. Maybe you don't bring in all 4, but you definitely want 2 or 3 of them. Just because I don't think you can afford to have an opening hand that has so many reactive cards on the draw. On the play, I think bringing a lot of them in
for
Gerry is probably excellent. So yeah, Kyle sitting on Mountain and Ember Hauler versus a double Stoneforge Mystic and a 5 counter Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Well, the way this matchup is played out, the Goblin deck definitely gets ahead in the beginning, and so even just having those for later on when you're countering the burn that can finish off the game, something like a Stagger Shock or a Kick Burst Lightning, those Flash Freezes can be absolutely necessary.
Right, because you just can't. You can stabilize, but you can't afford to take that extra damage. You have to be very, very effective. All right, so down comes Glacial Fortress, I believe. And Gerry passes the turn. Creeping Tar Pit slowly whittling away at Kyle's life total.
Yep. And it's interesting that there are no swords on the board yet for Gerry, especially since he's gone and gotten both of them.
Right. I expect come Kyle's end step, we will see some swords enter the battlefield. So Goblin War Driver.
And Kyle's asking now. Gerry's turned into the permission deck. Double flash freeze will do that.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, so Gerry opts not to put any swords in with Stoneforge Mystic.
Well, he's sacrificing the Marsh Flats. So.
Okay, so now maybe he's like, okay, I need to get those preordained cards back in there. Maybe he just knows he needs the land and wants
well, he
to
shuffled after the search from the Mystic. So.
Oh, that's fair.
At this point, he's just pulling a land out and
yes.
doesn't know enough about his deck to know whether or not there's stuff on the bottom that he wants to leave there.
Right. Plus, he might need the land this turn too, because if he's aiming to do something like equip a Creeping Tar Pit and leave mana untapped. Let's see what he's going to do here. So he draws another flash freeze, his third flash freeze.
And remember, that's just a straight up hard counter against Kyle's deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Players, we're still taking signups for our Legacy Challenge. In addition, we have 3 events that have 2 spots left in them if you'd like to draft.
Gerry's trying to figure out which.
You would like to have a standard web box. We have 2 spots.
Gerry's trying to figure out which land to bring down. I think I saw another Creeping Tar Pit in his hand.
Yeah,
whether or not he should.
Might have been Darkslick Shores. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Whether or not he wants to push out another one, pushes out the Marsh Flats.
Yep. And now I think Gerry's trying to figure out if he can activate the Tar Pit, equip it, like what the right line of play is, because I'm sure he's figured out that Kyle's hand has burn in it, but how much burn and what burn is the question.
Mm-hmm. And whether or not he's willing to use that flash freeze to save the Tar Pit, or whether it's time to, whether he needs to hold on to it to keep himself alive. And he'll take the 3 from the Lightning Bolt.
And Kyle's still playing vigilantly, knowing that he needs to close out the game with burn at Gerry's head, and still doesn't bother to burn the Jace. He's made his plan clear long ago.
There's a Teetering Peaks. Makes that War Driver pretty aggressive. So you've got a 4-2 and a 3-2 swinging through after the Battle Cry.
All right. Yep. Walks like that.
And Gerry's ready to drop a whole bunch of guys. Just got to get rid of Kyle's board and get control of it. Pretty much any time that the board is clear, Gerry's probably winning.
Right, especially with that Jace on the table, because Gerry's perfectly happy casting, in quotes, an effective Day of Judgment when you get to have Jace in play,
Yep.
Wiping the board and then chasing it up is excellent.
Now the question is whether or not Kyle is willing to use some of his burn to keep one of his guys alive, or whether he wants to. Gerry indicating that Ember Hauler should go at his Creeping Tar Pit rather than at his head. Instead, Kyle sends it at the head, drops him down to 5, and it's about time to try and figure out whether or not he can get there.
Yep. Now he's staring at Manic Vandal and Burst Lightning. The Burst Lightning is good for 4 points. Okay, here comes a sword, and I think he wants to hold the Manic Vandal in an ironic twist, because he has to discard it to the Sword of Feast and Famine and keep his Burst Lightning.
Well, Burst Lightning doesn't get there, is the problem. Right now, it's 4 coming across, but probably going to be 3, because you got to leave somebody back. There's too much haste in Kyle's deck.
Absolutely.
Well, with that Condemn that he just drew, you don't need to leave people back. You can get very aggressive at this point.
Interestingly enough, there's also the play Gerry can make where he can condemn his own Stoneforge Mystic and gain life to put him out of burn range too. He can equip the sword and then after damage with the trigger on the stack, just condemn his creature.
Did he Marsh Flats down to... He Marsh Flats down to 4. So that puts him into burn range, and Kyle's probably feeling pretty good, but sitting on a sitting on the flash freeze.
All right. Oh, there's Gideon. Well, that both cuts off Kyle's haste creatures and both pose a huge problem for Kyle. I think Gerry has him on lethal next turn, so Kyle has to finish it here.
So this still triggers him.
And Sword Feast of Famine triggers.
Got to figure out what he's... Oh, and just untapping is such a beating.
Yes, exactly. Okay, yep, and so Gerry makes that play and condemns his own Stoneforge Mystic to gain some life.
Since he's not worried about Kyle's attackers anymore, it's time to get himself up and out of range.
Right, and I mean, the only way Gerry feels like he could lose, I mean, with that flash freeze in hand, he's pretty much got it gold, but, you know, he knows he could potentially get burned out somehow, maybe, and he doesn't want that to happen.
And he's still absolutely lethal next turn.
Yep.
Through the...
And yeah, he's got that burst lightning, but that's not going to be good enough.
Not going to get there.
$10 draft, number 5. Please report to the side event stage. Again, if you have signed up for $10 draft, number 5, please report to the side event stage.
All right, so Gerry...
Now the question here is, do you throw the burst lightning at Stoneforge Mystic? And I don't know what you're hoping for at this point. I don't think Kyle's got outs in his deck right now, but he can, you know, take a little bit longer to lose.
Yep, and Kyle's
flash freeze ends it all.
And that's it. So Gerry takes it 2-1.
Yep.
Good work.
Yep.
Good work, Gerry. Great deck by Kyle. Really cool to watch. Really fun to watch. Had a surprising amount of reach going along, but Gerry's tight play and cool innovations managed to take it down. Those condemns looked great for him.